May 1st, 2024. Well, finally, I guess the administration at Columbia University decided to take action and called in the police. I mean, I guess occupying a building and breaking in and doing all the things they were doing finally reached a level that even they felt they had to do something. And so they finally have acted. Of course, so they've carted them off, and that's a good sign. On the other hand, given the failed New York legal system, a system that has former President Trump on trial on some bogus charges and lets all kinds of dangerous criminals off without even any bail, um, hoping they'll actually show up for the trial, which probably won't happen for a long time. These guys will probably just walk immediately. And the good news, I guess, is that they've decided, at least it sounds like, to keep the police on site so they can't just come back again, which was a mistake they made when they got rid of the tent thing a week ago or so. And it looks like this kind of anarchy is spreading throughout a lot of campuses throughout the country. I think that in the conservative states, I think that effective action like was being taken against these individuals, whereas until this event in the blue states, they generally are getting by with it. And of course, that's kind of typical of their how these things go. Um, and for example, in the Texas case, of course, the problem is that the police are taking a strong action, but then your local Soros-funded DA that doesn't refuse to file charges and that sort of thing, and that'll be a problem. So you have all these issues, but this to top it off now, apparently I'm hearing that there's discussion by the Biden administration, which has been fairly mute on these threats against the Jewish students and so forth, now are planning to considering bringing in Palestinian refugees from Gaza into the United States, and that sounds like a very, very bad idea. Um, and hopefully somehow that can be blocked by Congress because it's a really dangerously bad idea. You'd be bringing terrorists into the country. I mean, how are you going to vet the Hamas people out from the rest of them? I mean, that's been the problem in this whole conflict anyhow. So, but at any rate, that's an idea that we definitely have to strongly oppose, and we'll see how that goes forward. By the way, if you like these videos, please give me a like. And it helps with the algorithm. Looking for more subscribers as always, and of course, I also, of course, post on Rumble if in fact you're on there under the same name. So either way, you can at Corrality452, so you can find me at either place. So we'll have to see how this thing plays out. I guess it will continue until the end of the sessions and the commencement addresses and so forth, and then maybe this will die down for the summer. However, it looks like the Democrats are going to have fun at their convention, perhaps similar to what happened in 1968, perhaps. Huh? Although the day's Chicago police are nothing like Mayor Daley's, so it probably won't be quite as dramatic. Huh? So anyhow, that's kind of the way that's evolving here. Of course, this also has an interesting effect on the Israeli actions in Gaza, which for the moment have wound down to a very low level. I think there was an occasional strike against a terrorist target, but this big move in Rafah, which is continuing to be promised, doesn't seem to be forthcoming. And there is an effort now to negotiate a 3-week ceasefire in return for the release of a certain number of hostages, I think something like 20. Supposedly, the last negotiation fell apart because Hamas couldn't claim that they could get 40 hostages released. So, on the other hand, there is a question about whether or not, if they gave up all the hostages, then or the remains of those that are they still have. Of course, it's possible some of them are buried under the debris of all those buildings that were blown up. I mean, that's certainly the risk that Israel was taking with the type of operation they were engaged in. So, at any rate, we'll see whether that pans out or not. I know that our illustrious Secretary of State is over there trying to negotiate it. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out, of course. And we're continuing to, follow all those issues. The other issue, of course, as I mentioned earlier, of course, the ongoing trial against former President Trump. I guess they had the contempt hearing, and he's been fined $9,000. So, and I think that's not a big problem for him, I don't think. The judge regrets he can't fine more, but unfortunately, that's all his law allows. The other operation would be to sentence him to some jail time, which of course would be useful in order to keep Trump on ice so he can't campaign even more, which would follow the Democrat plot in this whole thing. I do think, though, that this event itself, and definitely if they went for jail time, will give Trump the ability to appeal and eventually get this thing into federal court one way or the other. Because, I mean, the New York system, I think, is pretty well determined to go against Trump at this point. So, at least I think that, I mean, really, that there's a lot of, I think it's been described a lot, there's a lot of improper activity. This whole case is improper. And the judge clearly should have been recused. He clearly has too many conflicts of interest. And there's the actual charges themselves should have just been thrown out because of a statute of limitations violation and the attempt to bring a federal charge into a state court, all of which I think is flawed and probably will eventually be rectified at some level. However, the contempt thing is an actual decision, and so that makes it ripe for an appeal. Whereas until it was actually found in contempt and sentenced for it, it was premature, the way appellate decisions normally go, to actually go for an appeal. So I certainly hope he pursues that and hopefully can get into federal court. We're still kind of waiting. We're going to be waiting for some time to see what the Supreme Court does. And we discussed that in the last video about presidential immunity issues. One option I've thought on that subject, I didn't mention in the last video, but I'll mention here. One of the best decisions they might make would be to not issue a decision until after the election. Because after all, this is a big decision. It's actually kind of momentous because, I mean, for instance, if they agreed to absolute presidential immunity, regardless of what good or bad it would do for Trump, you have to understand that it would also apply to Biden or any other Democrat. And given Biden's proclivity to do things that are pressing the limit of the law anyhow, I mean, he would be unleashed, to do all kinds of illegality. So on the one hand, they really can't decide that way. And on the other hand, if they actually do something that destroys Trump's presidential campaign and perhaps leads to a serious Democrat victory, the conservative majority on the court may well be joined by a lot of screaming liberals next year. And so they need to be wise that they kind of do something. The least controversial thing they could do would be to not make a decision until after the election, in which case they could keep the DC case on ice until then, and probably could try, and that would be a useful thing to do. So we'll have to kind of see how that goes. And so anyhow, and of course, in Ukraine is now, I guess, on the way to getting a whole bunch of new weapons, and so we'll have to see how that all plays out. I was reading an article that was talking about the small rocket launch, small diameter bomb system we had apparently turned out to be not that effective, and our guided Excalibur artillery shell has also been met with a lack of effectiveness. So this is the problem you have when you're actually engaged in a near peer competitor. As opposed to going after people that live in caves in Afghanistan. A little bit more challenging. So at any rate, that's kind of it for now, and we'll have to keep tuned in to all these developments, and hopefully we can, I guess we'll have to put up with all these student protests. However, I have to ask the people behind this, are they really trying to defeat the Democrats here? I mean, this is not necessarily good for the Democrats. It puts them in a real quandary. and definitely puts a lot of Jewish Democrat members of Senate and House a bit in a quandary too, I think. So, at any rate, I'll wrap this up for now. As always, of course, I'll be posting both on YouTube and Rumble, and the addresses of my social media accounts are in the description below. So, all for now.